I once thought I was a strong person. I had weathered countless storms in life, rising up after many failures. But one night, I couldn't get back up anymore. It was a night like any other. Quiet on the outside, but inside me, a storm raged. I lay in a dark room, no lights, no music, no phone, just heavy breathing and a blank stare at the ceiling. Empty. No more tears to shed, no words to say. My soul felt like it was being sucked into an endless void, with no anchor, no destination. Everything led me to that moment, a string of failures, loved ones leaving one by one, shattered dreams, and even I no longer believed in myself. I no longer knew who I was, why I was living, or if anyone still needed me in this world. I didn't tell anyone about it, because I was afraid. Afraid they would think I was weak, afraid they would pity me, afraid of being judged, and deep down, I was afraid that I was right, that I really was worthless. I went looking for light, but it seemed like every door was closed. I tried many things, reading positive books, attending therapy sessions, even trying to escape everything with entertainment, alcohol, and fleeting pleasures. But when night came, I was still faced with myself. There was still a deep, empty void that couldn't be filled. I had never thought about God. To me, God was something distant, belonging to churches, religion, and devout people. Not for someone like me who was a failure, confused, sinful, and lost. I once told my friend, if God really exists, he probably doesn't care about me. But that night, in the midst of a crisis with no way out, I whispered a prayer. I didn't know to whom I was speaking, or if anyone could hear me, but it came from the depths of my despair. If anyone is out there, please help me. I didn't know that, at that very moment, the light was beginning to shine. I lived in a city that never slept, where the lights shone brightly every night as if they could swallow all the darkness. But strangely, the brighter they shone, the more lost I felt. In the bustling crowd, I was just a lone figure, walking against the flow. After that dark night with no way out, I decided to change. Not from within, but by trying to fill the emptiness with external things. I threw myself into work, working day and night as if being busy could drown out the painful whispers in my heart. I bought things I didn't need with money I didn't have to impress people I didn't really know. I tried to turn my small apartment into a luxurious place to feel valuable. But behind the beautiful photos on social media was a cold room, and I lay there, silent with loneliness that no one could see. I tried to have fun, parties, loud music, fake laughter amid alcohol and colored lights. I tried fleeting relationships, not to love, but to temporarily forget that I was falling apart inside. But every morning when I woke up, I felt emptier than the day before. I thought, if I just try a little harder, I'll be okay. But the harder I tried, the deeper I sank. I began to fear the light because it exposed what I was hiding. I feared the mirror because I no longer recognized the person staring back at me. One night, standing on the top floor of the building where I worked, I looked down at the bright lights stretching across the city. Everyone seemed to be living, moving, having goals, having someone to love. And there I was, standing there, seemingly at the top, but inside completely empty. I thought to myself, if the city lights can't save me, what can? I didn't know then that that question, which seemed so hopeless, was actually a step forward. Because when all the artificial lights fail, the real light can finally shine through. I once thought I had a large network of friends, crowded gatherings, chat groups that were always active, and likes and ha-has that echoed daily on social media. But when the darkness truly descended, I realized those laughs were easier to extinguish than I thought. I can't pinpoint the exact moment when everything started to change. Maybe it was when I stopped making plans to go out, when I started replying to messages later and later, or when I sat in a cafe with them. But my mind was somewhere else. Somewhere I was struggling with an empty feeling I couldn't name. One day I tried calling a close friend just to talk, just to hear a familiar voice. But the call ended abruptly. They were busy. The next time was the same. The time after that, I didn't call. I started learning to be silent, and gradually everyone else got used to the silence without asking questions. I was still present at gatherings, but I was like a shadow. No one really noticed that I was tired, emotionally exhausted. They talked, joked, discussed new movies, dates, upcoming trips. As for me, I sat there smiling when I should, nodding when I should, but inside I just wanted to leave as soon as possible. One day I opened my old messages. Birthday wishes, memories, trips. It all looked like a beautiful album, but it no longer belonged to me. Everyone was still living, still connected, but they didn't need me anymore. Or maybe I had excluded myself from that circle without even realizing it. I don't blame them, because honestly, I wouldn't know what to say if they asked, "Are you okay?" What could I say when I don't even understand what's going on inside myself? Loneliness doesn't come with a loud noise. It quietly creeps into every crack in your heart. It comes when you hear your phone ring and it's not for you. It comes when you're online and no one messages you. It comes when you see your old friends posting photos of their outings, and you're no longer in the frame. I used to be someone who was always busy with relationships. Now I am left with only myself. And it was in that emptiness, where there was no one left to lean on, that I began to understand. Either I would collapse completely, or I would have to find another anchor. Something or someone beyond the limits of humanity. At that time, I didn't know that I was gradually moving towards the light. I only knew one thing. Everything that had held me back was now gone. And if I was still alive, it was surely not just to wander around a city that was brightly lit but so cold. There was a period in my life when I was neither sad nor angry, just an indescribable emptiness. All my emotions seemed to have been drained away. I woke up not because I was excited about the new day, but because the alarm clock rang. I ate not because I was hungry, but because I knew that if I didn't, I would feel dizzy. I was alive, but not really living. Inside me was a blur, where questions kept repeating themselves. If I disappear, will anyone notice? If I cease to exist, will anyone really be sad? I know it sounds dramatic, but at the time, that was my reality. I didn't tell anyone because I was afraid of bothering them, afraid of being judged as weak, afraid of being seen as someone who was overreacting. So I kept it all inside, and little by little, I lost my sense of self. I remember days when it rained for days on end. I sat in my small room, watching the raindrops roll down the window, feeling as empty as the gray sky outside. My phone was silent. No one called, no one texted. Social media was full of smiles, achievements, coffee dates, and trips. As for me, I didn't care about appearing or being forgotten. Once I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. That face, it was me, but it seemed like a stranger. My eyes were sunken, my skin pale, my smile forced and awkward. I used to be full of energy, someone everyone loved, someone who was always there when someone needed me. What now? I don't even recognize myself anymore. In that moment, a question echoed like a deep reverberation from within. Does anyone truly care about me? No one answered. No light shone through. But strangely, I didn't collapse. Despite the exhaustion, the numbness, the feeling that another gentle breeze could sweep me away, I stayed. A small part of me still hoped, even though I didn't know what I was hoping for. I began to observe the people around me more closely. It turned out that many of them were smiling without really being happy. There were also evasive glances and "I'm fine" messages that weren't really true. And I thought, maybe I'm not the only one asking that question. Does anyone really care about me? Does anyone see my tears when I turn away and walk away? Does anyone notice the times I am silent, not because I am okay, but because I have no strength left to speak? At that time, I did not know that the only one silently witnessing every silent tear of mine was God. He did not answer my question right away, but he was waiting at some turning point to let me know. Even if the whole world forgot me, there was one who never took his eyes off me. I didn't see the light in this chapter of my life, but something inside me began to crack. Not because I was falling, but because I was about to face a greater truth, that I was not invisible. I began to fear the night, not because of the darkness, but because of what was hidden in it. Every time the lights in my room went out, It was as if my mind was dropped into a bottomless pit, a place where sad memories, accusing voices, and nameless fears came flooding back. Nightmares became my terrifying companions. Sometimes I saw myself falling endlessly through the air. Other times I found myself trapped in a windowless room with no way out. Worse still were the dreams about the past, where I relived my mistakes, broken relationships, and moments I wished I could undo. I wake up at 3 a.m., my heart pounding, drenched in sweat. And then, a familiar feeling washes over me, anxiety. I can no longer control my thoughts. Even in the quietest moments, my mind is still talking. It whispers about failure, about how I'm not good enough, about how life has no meaning. I couldn't sit still, relax, or just calm down like people told me to. Every morning I opened my eyes and a new battle began, a battle with myself. I tried everything to calm my mind: soft music, herbal tea, meditation videos. At times I tried seeing a doctor and was prescribed sleeping pills. But what I truly lacked wasn't sleep. I lacked peace. One night, after a nightmare worse than usual, I sat up, clutched my head, and whispered, "God, if you're real, please help me sleep. I can't take this anymore." I didn't expect anything after saying that, but strangely enough, that night I fell asleep. No nightmares, no panic, just a normal sleep, something I had forgotten how it felt like. I wasn't sure it was God, but a seed was planted in my heart from that moment on. Maybe someone was listening. In the days that followed, my anxiety didn't disappear, but I began to try something I had never done before: pray. Not the kind of prayer I had heard somewhere, but the most honest, raw words. "I'm so tired. I'm afraid of living like this forever. I don't know where I'm going anymore. God, if you see me, please don't abandon me." Even though there was no answer, daring to speak to the one I didn't fully believe in made me feel a little lighter. I no longer felt like I had to put on a brave face to appear fine. I began to realize that the biggest battlefield wasn't out there, it was inside my mind. And I also began to realize there was only one being who could calm the storm inside: the Creator. I don't remember exactly what day it was. I only know that it was very dark, and my heart was so empty that I just wanted to disappear. The room was eerily quiet, and I sat there, alone, with unanswered questions. I tried everything to escape this deep pit: therapy, inspirational books, positive podcasts, even empty words of encouragement from acquaintances. But it was all like putting a Band-Aid on a deep wound. I smiled in front of others, but inside I was broken beyond repair. I began to accept that I might never be okay again. That night I stepped out onto the balcony. The sky was starless, just a thick, pitch-black curtain. A gentle breeze blew by, and tears suddenly welled up in my eyes. I looked up, not because there was anything special to see. It was just that I didn't know where else to look. Below me was an abyss of anxiety. Around me were walls of loneliness. Inside me was the silence of disappointment, and above me was a silent sky. I don't follow any religion. I used to think that faith was a luxury for the weak. I used to mock those who prayed. But that night, I had nothing left to hold on to. My voice broke, weak, like a child who didn't know what else to do but cry, "God, if you're real, I'm here." That was it. No ritual, no solemnity, no expectations. Just a question, coming from a place deep inside that I didn't even know I still had. There was no thunder, no light from the sky, no voice echoing in my head. But something happened. I no longer felt completely alone. It wasn't that I felt anything specific, but in that moment, when I dared to speak, something inside me shifted. It could have been hope. It could have been the vulnerability I'd been holding back for so long. It could have been someone, something, actually listening. I sat there for a long time, doing nothing, saying nothing more. But for the first time in many nights, I didn't want to die anymore. I went back into my room and closed the door. The yellow light flickered in the room, but inside me, for the first time, there was a small, faint glimmer. But it was real. The next day, my life was the same old problems, the same mental exhaustion. But one thing was different. I began to search. I no longer turned my back. Even though I wasn't completely convinced, I began to listen. And the question, is God real, was no longer just a desperate cry. It had become an invitation. If you are real, please let me know. I don't know why I replied to that message. To be honest, when I saw my old friend's name flash on the screen, I was about to scroll past like I always did. We used to be close, but we hadn't been in touch for a long time. Perhaps I had withdrawn from all relationships, afraid of having to answer the question, "How have you been?" when I didn't know whether to be honest or pretend everything was fine. But that day I opened the message. It was a simple line. "Join me at church this Sunday. No pressure, but I think you need this." Church, I read those words over and over. In the past, I used to laugh to myself whenever someone mentioned going to church. I associated it with dry, formal things, incomprehensible sermons, and pious people. But now, with my heart empty and my soul shattered like a broken glass, I couldn't laugh anymore. I just felt tired. I didn't respond right away. But that Sunday morning, instead of burying myself under the blankets as usual, I got up. Not because I felt interested, but because I had nothing left to lose. It was a small group, just a few people gathered in the cozy living room of an apartment. There was no pulpit, no big band, and no one was dressed up. I felt awkward when I walked in, afraid of being scrutinized, afraid of being asked personal questions. But surprisingly, they just smiled, greeted me gently, and gave me a seat. No one asked me to tell them my life story. No one taught me how to live my life. It was just a group of people sitting in a circle, singing a few short songs together. Someone played the guitar. The voices were simple. The lyrics were straightforward. But for some reason, each word seemed to gently touch a part of me that had been locked away for so long. One line kept repeating in my mind. "Even if I walk through the darkest valley, your hands are holding me." I didn't sing along. I just remained silent. But my eyes began to well up. No one noticed. No one judged. And I felt safe. The person sharing that day was a man around my age who looked very ordinary. He recounted the story of a period of severe depression when he thought he would never recover. He didn't try to preach. He just told his story. But I was speechless because it was so much like my own. Every word he spoke felt like unlocking the layers of defense I had built up over the years. At the end of the session, my friend invited me to stay for a light meal. I wanted to refuse, but then I nodded, perhaps because it had been so long since I felt invisible. That night I went home. The feeling was still dark, but this time there was a faint glimmer of light. A ray of hope, no matter how small, was still light. I didn't rush to believe it. I hadn't changed anything. But one thing was certain, I was no longer closed off like before. Perhaps what kept me going wasn't grand sermons or spectacular miracles. It was simply a sincere invitation, at the right time, from someone who cared enough to ask. A tiny ray of light, but enough to keep me from turning back into the darkness. I didn't go there because of faith. I didn't go there because I believed in God. I went because I was exhausted. Exhausted to the point where I no longer had the strength to resist. No more arguments to refute. No more masks to hide behind. No more energy to keep pretending that I was okay. I walked into that room like a stranger in a world that didn't belong to me. When the door opened, I almost turned away. The unfamiliar faces, the laughter, the gentle greetings, they seemed happy, and I was not. I felt like a stain on a beautiful painting, like a dark cloud in a blue sky. Part of me wanted to disappear. The other part just wanted someone to see me for who I really was. No one asked why I was there. No one tried to pull me into the conversation. They just gently handed me a song sheet, invited me to sit down, and left me alone. The first song began. I didn't recognize the melody, but the lyrics were strange, as if someone had written them from my heart. When my heart has no strength to walk, when my life is filled with darkness, you are still there, never leaving. I tried to stay calm, I didn't want to cry in front of strangers, but a tear silently rolled down my cheek. Then another. I was too exhausted to hold them back. No one said anything, but I knew I was no longer alone. The person sharing that day was a woman around my age. She said that there was a time when she too stood on the brink. She too had asked, God, if you are real, where are you in all this pain? I saw myself in her words. No, not exactly the same, but the pain was familiar. And then she said something I will never forget. Sometimes we don't need answers. We just need to know that we are not alone. Those words were like a gentle embrace for my soul, a soul that had shrunk from fear and hurt. At the end of the meeting, they invited me to stay for a meal. I nodded. Not because I was hungry, but because I didn't want to go back to that empty room. The room was empty except for me and the echoes of exhaustion. Someone asked me, "Are you okay?" I didn't know how to respond, but then I just said the truth. I'm not okay, but today I feel a little lighter. Just a little, but to me, that was life. That night, when I returned home, I sat down on the floor, leaning against the wall. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't play any music. I just sat there in silence. And for the first time in a long time, I whispered, if God is real, if today wasn't just a coincidence, then please don't leave me. I didn't know what lay ahead. I wasn't sure I could believe, but I knew today I had taken a small step out of the darkness. Not because I was strong, not because I understood anything, but because I was too exhausted to keep fighting something gentle that was coming closer. And sometimes that surrender is the beginning of a miracle. I don't remember what day of the week it was. To be honest, my days back then were all the same. Just a cycle of waking up, trying to breathe, and then sinking back into exhaustion. But I remember that moment as clearly as if it happened yesterday. At that moment, I was sitting at the back of the group room. No one was forcing me to sing. No one was looking at me with curiosity or pity. I was left alone, and in that silence, something happened. The first chords rang out. The melody was slow, sad, but warm. Then the voice sang, no matter how dark the night is, no matter how confused my heart is, you are still there. You still love me. I listened and my heart ached. The words pierced through the armor I had been wearing for so long. They didn't ask if I was worthy. They didn't demand that I understand. They didn't tell me to change right away. They just were there. And for someone lost in the night, that presence was magical. I felt like someone was sitting next to me, placing their hand on my shoulder, saying nothing, just enduring the pain with me. Not trying to explain or take it away, just staying there with me. I burst into tears. Not just a few tears, I cried uncontrollably, as if something that had been bottled up inside me for so long had finally been released. I wasn't ashamed. I didn't try to wipe away my tears. I had nothing left to hold on to. And that was when I truly surrendered. Not surrendered to failure, but surrendered to unconditional love. After the song, someone stepped down from the stage and quietly approached me. Not to preach, not to offer excessive comfort, just gently asked, would you like someone to pray with you? I nodded. She placed her hand on mine and began to whisper, Lord, I don't know the pain of this friend, but you do. I don't understand everything you are going through, but he does. Please hold him in your arms tonight. And if there is only one thing he wants to say to you today, let him know that he is still there. I was almost choked up because that was exactly what I needed to hear. He was still there, not abandoning me because I am weak, not turning away because I once doubted, not condemning me because I came to you late and imperfect. You are still there in the song, in the prayer, in the comforting presence of this community. That night, I went home with red, swollen eyes, but my heart felt lighter than ever before, because for the first time, I didn't just hear about the light, I saw it shining in the darkness of my own night. And I knew that this might not be the end of the pain, but it was the beginning of something new. I still don't understand everything about God. I still have many questions. But I know one thing for sure, He had begun to draw near to me, and I had begun to stop running. I used to think that if God really existed, he would have to come with something spectacular, a great miracle, a thunderous clap, an earth-shattering event that would change everything. But no, he came in silence. No noise, no coercion, just a gentle knock on the door I had locked for so long. My heart. After that night, as the words "He is still there" echoed in my head, I began to feel something stirring inside me. It wasn't a sudden change, nor was it intense emotion, but a quiet urging. Don't close your heart anymore. I went home and sat on the familiar chair in the corner of the room, where I had sat for hours in despair. And for the first time, I didn't bury myself in my phone or loud music. I just sat there and whispered, God, if you're really knocking, please don't leave me. I didn't know how to pray. I had never learned how to pray. I had never read a chapter of the Bible. But those words were more real than anything I had ever said in my life. And you know what? I felt him there. Not like a clear voice in my ear, not like a vision appearing before me, but a gentle feeling, like someone had just placed their hand on my shoulder and said, I hear you. That was the first time I stopped resisting. No trying to prove I was okay. No continuing to hide the brokenness behind forced smiles. No blaming circumstances, other people, or myself anymore. Just simply saying, I'm tired, please help me. I didn't expect anything. I didn't demand that God do anything big. Just that, if he was real, please stay. And day by day, step by step, I began to open up a little more. I returned to the small group the following week, not because I was invited, but because I wanted to go. I began to ask questions, naive, sometimes messy, but real. I began to write a journal, recording each day, each emotion, each whisper to God. And in all of that, I realized God didn't wait for me to be perfect before he came. He came right when I was messy, confused, and full of doubt. He knocked on the door, not because I deserved it, but because he loves me. No one forced me to believe. No one made me change. It was his love, quiet but powerful, that did it. That day, I wrote a line in my notebook. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. And if it's true that God is entering my life, then no matter what, I don't want to go back to the way things were. The door to my heart didn't open all at once. It opened little by little. But that day, I turned the first key. And I knew, from that moment on, things would never be the same again. I used to think that if God was real, he would make all the pain go away immediately. I thought that once I believed in him, everything would become easy. Light would flood in, miracles would follow one after another. But no. In the days following my first prayer, life on the outside remained largely unchanged. I still woke up in the same old room, still had to deal with broken relationships, stagnant work, and lingering loneliness. But something was quietly changing inside me. I began to notice the little things I had previously overlooked or considered meaningless. Like how the small group leader always asked, "How are you today?" and actually listened to the answer. Not just a casual question, but with a patient gaze, a gentle nod, a soft pat on the shoulder. I used to think it was just kindness, but now I understand it was God's love being expressed through others. Or like a stranger in the elevator who smiled at me on Monday morning. I know they probably didn't think much of it, but for someone struggling with darkness like me, that smile was the light of day. I began to see God in the little things. A Bible verse printed on a flyer I picked up on the sidewalk. I will never leave you. A message from an old friend sent by mistake, but at exactly the moment I needed a check-in. A leaf falling gently into my palm, reminding me of Sunday's sermon. He cares for the sparrows, how much more for you? No angels appeared, no grand miracles, just a quiet flow of presence, gentle and undeniable. I began to understand God doesn't always act the way we want, but he is always present in the way we need. In our small group, someone once said, notice his gentleness, because sometimes light doesn't come with fireworks, but with a small candle that never goes out. I found myself being healed, not by dramatic shocks, but by each broken piece being put back together with love. I still have many questions. There are still days of doubt, but amidst it all, I have a new peace. Not loud, but real. I wrote in my journal, God doesn't change circumstances right away, but He is changing me. And through every smile, every glance, every hug, I begin to see Him. That's a different kind of miracle. Not stopping the wind, but teaching me how to walk in the storm. There was a truth I had never dared to face. I carried too many chains in my heart, not from others, but from myself. I blamed others for being indifferent, but in reality, I had locked myself in a dark prison of anger. I blamed circumstances, but in truth, I had clung to painful memories as if they were part of who I was. For many years, I lived with feelings of inadequacy because of my failures, because I couldn't keep my family together, because of the harsh words from my loved ones, because of the things I did and the things I didn't do. I didn't just feel unworthy of God, I felt unworthy of love. But the further I walked with God, the more I was invited to look at myself, not to condemn, but to be healed. One day in a small group, someone shared this verse from the Bible. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I had heard this before, but this time it touched the deepest part of my heart. I began to dare to tell God the things I had kept hidden, my anger toward my parents, the shame of being betrayed, my disappointment in myself. I cried, not because I was weak, but because I finally didn't have to be strong anymore. I wrote in my journal after that meeting, "Lord, I don't know how to let go, but if you want to, please untie each knot for me. I'm ready." And He began to do just that, little by little. One day I was sitting in the park and suddenly remembered my childhood, the days when I just wanted someone to hold me when I was afraid. And in that moment, I felt like God was there, like a gentle father saying, "I know," and I was there. I began to forgive, not because others deserved it, but because I didn't want the past to control my present anymore. I forgave those who had abandoned me. I forgave myself for trying so hard in the dark. I forgave the hurtful words that had pierced my heart. Forgiveness didn't come overnight, but every time I surrendered my pain to God, a chain was broken. I am no longer exhausted like before. I breathe easier, feel lighter, more authentic. And in all of that, I realized God did not come to save me from the darkness. He came to cut every chain I thought was part of me. Now I walk, still with scars, but no longer bound by chains. I once thought that to survive in this life, I had to be strong at all costs. When I was in pain, I remained silent. When I collapsed, I pushed myself up. When I was hurt, I smiled and said, "I'm okay." I grew accustomed to wearing a mask of stability so no one could see the cracks spreading inside. I feared that if anyone saw my weakness, they would abandon me or look down on me. So I created a better version of myself, strong, busy, independent, not needing anyone, not needing God. But the truth is I'm tired, exhausted, empty. I can't keep pretending anymore. One night in Bible study, the leader read a passage. "My strength is made perfect in weakness." I sat there in silence. Strength comes from weakness? I had never thought of it that way. To me, weakness was a sign of failure, something to be ashamed of, something to hide. But through those words, I began to understand something. God is not afraid of my weakness. On the contrary, He draws closer when I stop trying so hard. I remember one evening in my small room. I knelt down and prayed for the first time without trying to fix my words. I just said, "I'm so tired, Lord. I'm not as strong as I thought. I don't know how to live anymore." And the strange thing was, in that moment of honesty about my weakness, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt relieved. As if God was saying to me, "I've been waiting for you for a long time, to stop trying so hard and to let me be your father." I started allowing myself to cry when I needed to cry, to rest when I needed to rest. I practiced saying I don't know instead of trying to have all the answers. I began opening up to a few friends in my small group, even about things I thought no one could understand. And they didn't abandon me. They hugged me, prayed for me, and cried with me. For the first time, I felt that community wasn't a place to perform, but a place to express myself and be healed. Now I understand, true strength isn't about never falling down. It's about daring to fall down before God so He can lift you up. I no longer have to hide my sadness, no longer have to fear that people will see me as broken. I live authentically, and God is there in that authenticity. He doesn't love a polished, perfect version of me. He loves me for who I am, with tears, failures, and empty spaces. I no longer need to pretend to be strong. I am weak, but He is not. And in that very weakness, He does the strongest thing. He heals my heart. After I fell down and began to pray sincerely to God, something miraculous happened. I began to feel alive again, but I soon realized healing is not a quick fix. It's not just one prayer and all the wounds disappear. It's not just reading the Bible and all the pain and confusion go away. The journey of healing is a bumpy road, and there were many times when I thought I had overcome something, only to find myself back where I started. There were mornings when I woke up full of hope. Then by the afternoon, an old memory would resurface, and I would feel like I was drowning again. I began to realize that healing began when I dared to face the truth. No more avoiding, no more blaming, no more pretending to be okay. I write in my journal. I name my pain. I tell God about my childhood filled with hurt, about the emotional deprivation, about the fear of abandonment that has haunted me for so many years. And God does not turn away. He stays in every tear. He does not rush me to get over it faster. He is patient like a father, waiting, listening, and walking alongside me. A friend in my small group said to me, "Healing is not forgetting. It is looking back without falling down." And that takes time, but God won't leave you in the middle. I wrote those words on my bedroom wall. Some days I read them and didn't believe them, but then I learned an important lesson. Trust doesn't come from feelings, it comes from choices. I chose to believe that God was working in me, even though I didn't see immediate results. I chose to take small steps, even though the past kept pulling me back. There were times when I had to forgive those who had hurt me, not just once, but many times. Each time the old pain resurfaced, I had to choose to let go a little more. I realized that forgiveness is a process, not a moment. I learned to tell myself. I used to think the Bible was an ancient religious book, full of rules, difficult language, and disconnected from reality. I had tried reading it a few times before, but I gave up after just a few lines. The names, genealogies, and commandments seemed irrelevant to the pain I was carrying. But after a while in a small group, I was encouraged to try reading short passages and to pray before reading. At first I read with skepticism, but then I never expected that God could speak directly to me through those very pages of the Bible. I remember one day after a restless night due to sudden anxiety, I opened the Bible and my eyes happened to fall on Psalm 119:1. The Lord is near to those whose hearts are broken. He saves those whose spirits are crushed. I was speechless. That verse, as if written just for me, at the exact moment I needed to hear it. I felt like God was sitting next to me, placing His hand on my shoulder and saying, "I see you. I am here. Do not be afraid." From that moment on, I began to change my approach. I no longer read the Bible as a scholar, but as a child listening to his father's words. I began underlining passages that touched my heart. I wrote short passages on sticky notes and posted them on my bathroom mirror, kitchen cabinets, and computer screen. Every time my eyes fell on those words, I saw Him reminding me, "You are not alone. I am leading you through the darkness." Once I was struggling with feelings of guilt over my past, my mistakes, the hurtful things I had said to others, and the bitterness in my heart. I felt unworthy of love and forgiveness. Then I read Isaiah, "Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow." I burst into tears. How could a holy one love someone like me, a person full of blemishes and failures? But it was God's words that broke the chains of sin in my mind. I realized the Bible is not a dead book. It is alive, and it carries the Spirit of God. It does not just tell stories about people from the past, it touches my life today. It is not just history, it is a love letter, written by the one who knows every crack in my heart. And in every page of the Bible, I see Him. A patient God, a loving Father, a Savior who never abandons me, even when I turn my back on Him. From that moment on, the Bible was no longer a duty. It became my daily breath. It is the light that guides me through the darkness. It is where I find answers and where I find Him. I see Him in every word. I hear His voice on every page, and I know He is leading me forward. I used to think that change was a moment, a sudden miracle, like a bolt of lightning from the sky, erasing all pain. But I was wrong. Recovery for me is like wading through mud, each step heavy and slow, but with a hand holding on, never letting go. I still remember the first mornings after I started praying again. The emptiness in my heart didn't disappear right away. I still struggled with feelings of disappointment, unwarranted sadness, and prolonged mental fatigue. But something had changed. I was no longer alone in that darkness. Like a muddy child sitting in the rain, I felt someone's arms gently wrap around my shoulders. He didn't push me to my feet right away, but He was there, sitting beside me in the mud. Day by day through scripture, small group meetings, and conversations with spiritual friends, God began to wash away the lies I had believed. I'm worthless. No one truly loves me. There is no way out of this life. All of those things. He pulled them out of me as if peeling away layers of thick mud that had been stuck to me for a long time. There were days when I stumbled back. A small thing would happen, and I would want to hide in my familiar dark corner. I found myself angry, irritable, and ashamed of my uncontrolled emotions. I prayed, "Lord, I thought I was doing better. Why is this happening?" And in that silence, I remembered the verse from Psalm 34. He lifted me out of the pit of destruction, out of the muddy clay, and set my feet on a rock and established my steps. It was as if I heard Him whisper, "I don't expect you to be perfect right now. I just want you to keep holding on to my hand." It was strange. Even though I was still weak, I no longer wanted to go back to where I had been. I began to long to step into the light, even though my eyes were still sore from the darkness. I learned to forgive myself because God had forgiven me. I learned to be patient with my own journey because He didn't rush me or condemn me. And I learned to believe that He is the one working in me to will and to act according to His good purpose. Being pulled out of the mud wasn't a sudden jerk. It was a process of Him patiently lifting me up bit by bit. I began to clean up my room, hanging a few Bible verses on the walls. I played hymns every morning. I wrote in my journal, not about my pain, but about the small things I saw God doing in me. Though life hadn't changed much on the outside, on the inside, I was different. I no longer felt lost in the world. I no longer saw myself as a failure. I no longer lived in the darkness of my own making. Because the light had touched me, and He was pulling me out, patiently, gently, lovingly. I used to fear the darkness. Not because of strange noises or childhood fears of monsters, but because night was when I could no longer pretend. During the day, I could smile. I could keep busy. I could make others think I was okay. But when night fell, when there was no one to text, no voices, no streetlights shining through the window, I was face to face with myself. I remember the nights I lay awake, pulling the covers over my head, tears streaming down my face. I remember the feeling of emptiness every time I opened my eyes in the middle of the night, like falling into a deep pit. I remember repeating the same question over and over again. God, can you hear me? I'm so tired. Now I still have long nights. I still have nights when I can't sleep soundly. I still have moments when my mind is filled with worries and distractions, but I am no longer afraid of the darkness because I know there is one who never sleeps. He watches over me. He is there in the silence, never leaving me. One night I was sitting on the balcony. The moonlight dimly lit the rooftops. My heart was in turmoil, but it was no longer chaotic. I whispered, I can't feel you, but I believe you are here. And at that moment, a gentle breeze blew by. Not strong, not violent, but enough for me to know I was not alone. I remembered the words in Psalm 139. If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. Even if I say, surely the darkness will cover me and the light around me becomes night. Even the darkness is not dark to Him. The night is as bright as the day. for darkness and light are the same to him. I used to think that faith was an emotion, that you had to see to believe. But now I understand. Faith is walking in darkness, still believing that light exists. I don't need to always feel God to know that he is truly present. I don't need light before my eyes to know that the light of life is within me. And strangely, when I stopped seeking light in a human way, I began to see light with spiritual eyes. In a simple text message from a friend, "I'm praying for you tonight." In the eyes of a child in church who looks at me and smiles brightly. In a song that repeats the words, "He never leaves me." Darkness is no longer my enemy. For where there is deepest darkness, there the light of God shines brightest. I used to be afraid to enter the night. Now I understand. Night is where I see him most clearly, not with my eyes, but with my heart, not with certainty, but with surrender. I am not saying that I am perfect, but I know one thing for sure. God is present in the darkness, and when he is there, I am no longer afraid. After many years of living in the darkness of isolation, pain, and shame, I have begun to live in the light. Not only the light of God, but also the light of truth, of openness, of no longer hiding myself. I used to think faith was private. I used to think my journey was too messy to share. I was afraid others would judge, doubt, or worse, pity me. But then God reminded me of his words. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a bowl, but on a stand so that it gives light to everyone in the house. I realized that the light God had given me was not meant to be kept for myself, but to shine on those still in darkness, like I once was. And so I began to speak up, not with long sermons, not with flowery words, but with my own true story, that I had once collapsed, that I had once been desperate, that I had once begged to die. But then I saw him. I shared my story in small conversations with friends. I wrote a few lines on social media. I dared to talk about my faith at work, not to convince anyone, but to live authentically. At first I was scared, but then a message came. Your story made me cry. I'm where you once were. Thank you for speaking up. I thought I was the only one, and I realized every time I share the light God has shown into my life, that light spreads a little further. Living in the light doesn't mean I'm perfect, but now I no longer live to hide my mistakes. I no longer need to appear strong or flawless. I live authentically because light isn't afraid of darkness, because God loves me in truth, not in a filtered image. I don't boast about my faith because it's a gift, not an achievement. I don't share my story to get attention. I share it to testify to the one who saved me. Because if he could save someone like me, he can save anyone. I see more clearly than ever. Light is not just to lead me out of darkness, it is also to light the way for others. I am not perfect. I am still being healed every day. But now I live in the light, and I choose to live so that light can spread. I used to think faith was a moment. It was an overwhelming feeling during a service, a song, or a prayer. I used to think God's light was like a flickering flame, sometimes strong, sometimes weak, sometimes extinguished. But time has taught me something else. He is not a feeling, he is real, and his light never goes out. There were mornings when I woke up feeling empty. I didn't feel spiritual. I didn't feel him close. I didn't see anything special. And then I wondered, has that light gone away? But then, in the midst of those ordinary days, he was still there. Through an unexpected phone call, a verse from scripture, a hug from a friend. Not through intense emotions, but through steady faithfulness. I realized, his light does not depend on my mood. He does not come only when I feel him. He is always there. Whether I see him or not, he is like the sun behind thick clouds. Clouds may obscure it, but they can never extinguish the light. His presence is eternal. I began to look back on my life and saw that the moments when I thought I was most alone were the moments when he carried me through the darkness. When I was weary, he did not abandon me. When I doubted, he remained faithful. When I was lost, he quietly walked beside me, waiting for me to return. Faith is not always about feeling close to heaven. It is about believing in him, even when you feel nothing. Like a mother who loves her child, even when the child is asleep. Like a father who waits, even when his child turns away. God does not need me to be perfect to be present. He chose to stay, never leaving, never changing. In a world that is always changing, he is the unchanging light, never fading, never dying. He does not depend on the seasons or circumstances. He is not a flash of lightning that fades away. He is the light of dawn, gentle, enduring, never leaving. I write these words on an ordinary day. No climax, no miracles, no big surprises. But I smile because I know that light is still here, in me, around me, and it will never go out. I used to be lost in the darkness, thinking that I had to find my own way out, stand up on my own, save myself. I once believed that if I were strong enough, if I tried harder, I would be okay. But the harder I tried, the more exhausted I became. The more I struggled, the deeper I sank, until I had nothing left to hold on to but God. I did not see him with my eyes, but I saw him with my soul. I saw him in my first tears of repentance, in the strange peace amid the pain, in the song that rang out just as I was about to give up, in the hand that held me through a friend, a small group, a verse of scripture. No, my life is not perfect as I once hoped. There are still days of weariness. There are still wounds that need time to heal. But I am not the same person I was. I have seen him, and I will never be the same again. I no longer live to prove anything. I live to testify that God is real. He is there. He does not abandon anyone. He did not wait for me to be good before he saved me. He came when I was at my worst. He does not demand that I be strong to be loved. He embraced me in my weakness, in my mess, in my brokenness. I walk today not because I understand everything in the Bible, but because I know he is the light guiding my way. I love God not because he does everything I want, but because he is everything I need. Life is no longer about what I must do to be worthy. It revolves around how I can live because I have been saved. I know I cannot go back to the past, but I can step into the future with the one who is holding my hand. Among those still walking in the darkness, I pray that the light that found me will also find them, as he found me. No, I am not the same as before, because once you have seen the light, how can you live as you did in the darkness? My story ends here, but my journey with him has only just begun. And I know one thing for certain, I have seen him, and I will never forget that light. I once lived in darkness, thinking I would never see the light again. I wanted to give up, thinking my life was over. But in that moment, he appeared, not in thunder or great miracles, but in the gentle light of love, forgiveness, and hope. I can't say that life will be easy from now on, but I know one thing for sure, I am no longer walking alone. I used to search for a way out, but God didn't just give me an escape, he is the escape. I once begged for change, but he changed me first. The day I thought was the end turned out to be the beginning, and that light, he continues to shine. It doesn't depend on my emotions, circumstances, or strength, because he is faithful and his light never fades. If you are in the dark, I am not telling you to be strong. I just want to say, call on his name, because he is there even when you cannot see him, because he came to me and he can come to you. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.